let's talk to Stephen, who I think I'm not sure. It just says scientific evidence for Islam.
Damn.
Stephen, how the heck are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, thank you.
Awesome.
So
Thanks,
yeah, so I've grown up Muslim, and my dad was really into it, and we would watch a bunch of debates with Ahmadiyya just completely crushing these Christian people about how screwed up the Bible is, and the Quran having all these evidences that are in science. And I'm kind of a science nerd myself, so when I see things like in the Quran where it's like the Big Bang, it doesn't say the Big Bang, but it says like, don't the disbelievers see the whole universe was together in one piece and then we spread it apart. And then it says like, verily the universe is expanding and we made everything from water. Don't the disbelievers see? And I'm like, well, that's proof right there. Oh my God, that's amazing. We just learned that, 50 years ago with Edwin Hubble. So those are pretty compelling. There's some other things about like the hadith about the Arabian Peninsula was green and will become green again. And it's like, wow, that seems pretty accurate too for some Arab guy that's like a goat herder like 1400 years ago.
Accurate? I mean, I guess it's your definition of accuracy, because there are things that you just described there, and I'll say this straight off the bat, and there's no surprise there. I am not a scholar of Islam. Okay, if you want to talk to a scholar
Sure.
of Islam, we just talked before. You talk to other people who aren't me. Apostate Prophet's a great place.
Uh-huh.
Richard Gilliver can have a lot to say about this next week if you call in.
I've seen them.
But yeah. And that might be a better place to start. But let me ask you, with those descriptions, what could you do with that information? You're sort of painting a target around the arrow with that, aren't you?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Okay,
like,
all right, you acknowledge that.
In Islam that are problematic. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of one of those things where, there's, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, a broken clock can be right twice a day, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
I say that with respect to you, but a broken clock can be right twice a day, and you're counting the hits here, and I'm not digging at you, but like, what about like Muhammad riding a horse to the moon or some stuff like that? I mean, isn't that also in there? What's the bit about the flying horse business? Tell me about that.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Those are one of those things that make zero sense, and it's like they'll say, well, when he came back, he was flying over some caravans, and he was like, people were like, he didn't do that. And he'd be like, well, those caravans came back 2 weeks later, so that proves. But again, that's like in a book or some hadith that someone may have cherry-picked 1,400 years ago, and then they're saying now that's proof. But that, from today's standpoint, that's, like Harry Potter, like who knows?
Yeah.
There's zero evidence of that.
I guess it's the proof.
So Islam is kind of one of those things
go on, please.
Where like, there's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say.
I was going to say, there's some Christians that don't really take the Bible like verbatim, that this is the actual word of God. Many Jews do that, but for Muslims, it's usually like all or nothing. Like if you believe in some of it, you have to believe it all. And that's kind of how I was raised, and you just sort of like accept some of these things. I used to get really excited about the whole like embryology thing, and the formation of the, one thing, for example, the apostate prophet guy, I think sometimes he's doing his best, also maybe painting the target too, but it's like the stars fall, and he's like, that doesn't make any sense. Stars don't fall. Maybe in the old days they thought stars were maybe like 500 feet above their heads, but it's like in my mind, from my Muslim perspective, I'm like, no, that's like God is swearing by when the stars fall. That's like maybe like a supernova, like a star collapsing under its gravitational, energy or gravitational force, and exploding as a supernova. That's like an amazing thing to swear to. So it's kind of difficult to dismiss those things when you're raised looking at those things, and also being raised in the U.S. where you're exposed to science and things like that.
Yeah, I'm hearing a couple. Okay, I want to try one question first, which is, if a book gets some things right about the universe, or appears to get some things right about reality, what does that tell you about the reasons why it gets some things right about reality?
The reasons why it gets things right about reality? Well, it could be just from simple observation. It could be from guessing, but I think what we're led to believe is like, there's no way this Arab, sheep herder would have known this 1400 years ago, and therefore it must be revelation.
Yeah. Let me try it with something slightly different. I was listening to a podcast recently about Nostradamus. And now I'm remembering also when Penn and Teller did their episode of Bullshit about Nostradamus, which was pretty good. So people who are fans or supporters of Nostradamus will look at this collection of writings and look at some things that they say they interpret to say that, okay, this was a prophecy that came true. So if Nostradamus made a bunch of claims, and some of those claims appear to have corresponded with reality in some way, what does that tell us about why Nostradamus got a couple things right, if we're being very generous to old Nostradamus?
Do you mean like we look for the matches?
Well, I'm saying, like, some people come to the conclusion that Nostradamus got some things right because he had magical powers. Some people come to the conclusion that Nostradamus got some things right because his followers interpret him to have gotten some things right. Some people say that he just got lucky with some guesses. My point is this. I'll just put it on the table. The fact that there are interpretations of the Quran that seem to square with reality doesn't tell us anything, as far as I can tell, about how Muhammad got some things right. I'm ignoring the things that he appears to have gotten quite wrong. I'm just saying, because the argument is Muhammad got some things right. He couldn't have known these things given his circumstances. Therefore, this is evidence that this is inspired by God, right? I don't know how we could demonstrate that claim to be true, though.
You really can't. It's like a little bit of a jump of faith to be like, well, there's no, maybe not faith, but there's like, it's kind of like, how else could he know of these things? And the Quran is generally like poetic, and it doesn't really say specific things that you can nail it down on like something that's very prescriptive. There's a lot of things where the word could mean different things. And then like, as the centuries progress, people will like kind of use a different meaning of that word that makes more sense in today's age. It's very poetic. It's not like, humans are made of, water and 60% of this and that. It doesn't really go into those things, but there's like these signs when it says like, verily the universe is expanding. And I don't know, maybe there were some Greeks that also had those things. I mean, there was like Greek atomic theory, even though it was a complete guess, right? But those are relatively compelling for people that are born and raised in Islam, and they're taught all these things about it. And then later on, you're like, and look at all these things that resonate with modern science.
Right. But what do you do when your holy book of whatever, your holy book of choice or holy book that you were raised with, says things that run directly opposite to what science tells us is how something works, right? The best understanding we have of some particular physical phenomenon is X in this through a scientific understanding. And then the Bible or the Quran or the Rig Veda says it's this other thing. Now, as a person growing up in that faith tradition, you may be torn. You might choose to say, well, that is poetic language, okay? But what happens when now... But what happens when the scientific understanding for that particular phenomenon changes? Oh, well, then it's more... That's also poetic. It's just different poetics, I guess, as opposed to apologetics.
Yeah, there's definitely people that are... Sure. No, that definitely happens. I haven't seen anything like that yet. Maybe the one that's maybe most difficult is like it says like in embryology, the bones form before the flesh, like the bones are closed with flesh, and that's not how the fetus develops embryologically.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the only one that I've seen, which is not super blaring, but.
Well, Stephen, what I'm thinking is you talked about something else about the Quran, and a lot of holy books tend to be poetic. They don't speak in necessarily in the pinpoint specifics that we need to develop our understanding in a scientific way. But the truth is that PhDs, postdocs, folks who are like advancing human understanding as far as the physical world is concerned are not they might dumb it down for the rest of us, right, into poetic language, but the real work is being done in specific ways. And so while it might be interesting to note that a holy book may have a poetic coincidence with what the current scientific understanding is of a particular phenomenon, it's almost useless to us, because I don't need to know a poetic it might inspire me to go research it more deeply as a scientifically minded person or as a scientist, but I'm going to take all that poetics and I'm just going to set it on the shelf. I'm going to be like, let's pretend that doesn't exist. I need to figure out the actual mechanism for how this works, embryology,
But that's kind of the perspective of
but
that's kind of the perspective of maybe a non-Muslim or someone that's actually involved in scientific inquiry. But from the perspective of someone that's raised Muslim and has a lot at stake, because it's like, if you were born before Muhammad and Islam, it's like you're okay as long as you're a good person and you're good with your neighbors and you don't, hurt people. But if you know about Islam and you're taught about Islam, and then you're like, well, I got some issues with this, and then if part of it is wrong, then like all of it is wrong, and then Muhammad is a liar and he made all this up, then it's like there's high stakes, because you're in like hell forever.
Well,
or like a big deal.
Pascal's wager type of thing.
or Muhammad, this is the best understanding that he had at the time, and they hadn't developed this way of thinking at that time, and he was doing his best, as were all the other thinkers of the time. I don't think that damn it, who was the guy that did atomic theory over in the Ionian Peninsula? It wasn't Heraclitus. Who was it? Well, whatever. The pre-Socratic philosophers that like existence is water. Existence is
or fire.
Democritus. It was Democritus. I didn't look at the chat. I knew it from memory. It was Democritus. Look that up in your Funkin' Wagnall. But they weren't lying. They were trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure it out, and I don't fault them. Nor do I necessarily fault a parent or a family member who raises a child to the best of their ability, trying to teach them their religion because they want them to live a good, healthy life, and they want their soul, if they believe that it exists, to have eternal splendor in the afterlife. The problem is when they're so closed, their skeptical instinct, their skeptical muscles are so atrophied that they don't ever say, well, what if I could? They don't do the opposite. Like, what if I could be wrong about this? I'm creating damage because I'm just plowing this field no matter what is in it, and the plow is getting dented by all these rocks of reality. Oh, that's a stupid analogy. Anyway,
well, they're generally in our religion, they're okay with inquiry as long as you end up back with Islam.
Yeah, and that's convenient, right? I mean, all religions are kind of like that in a way, right? Yeah.
The thing that I always sort of circle back to in these conversations, because you've talked a lot about, being raised in Islam and sort of a tradition of Islam. And I was raised in Christianity, right? And people, everything that you've been saying with respect to Islam and the Quran are things that I've heard people say about Christianity. The thing that I sort of find myself always scratching my head with is, if I want to know about science, if I want to explore just facts about reality, if I want to learn about ethics and morality, I mean, there is nothing in the world of knowing things about reality that the Bible is the most useful tool for. The Bible is useful for as a window into religious tradition, understanding certain cultural things that have happened throughout history. You can look at the Bible and the impact that it's had. But if what I want to do is be a generally informed person who's got a square head on my shoulders with respect to ethics,
very square.
The Bible's not very useful, and it can be mostly confusing. It tends to lead people astray. So, and I think the same is true with respect to other holy books, including the Quran. I understand that there's people find tremendous value in their religious traditions. My question to you is, what value do you think there is to really be found in the Quran?
Good question.
Well, we're taught that it prescribes, the Quran and the Hadith, the tradition is actually like the epitome of all morality. There's like prescriptions for like how to wake up in the morning, how to keep yourself clean, like how to make love to your wife. Like everything is in there, and it's
everything you need. It's a final solution.
Example.
The Quran tells us how to make love to Kenneth's wife?
Specifically.
Jeez. Specifically?
Yeah. Right.
Sorry, Kenneth. That's private stuff.
Well,
Stephen, you've answered sort of a question, but not what we are taught.
Oh, sorry.
Forget about what. No, you're good. But like that's what you're taught. Forget about that. What do you think the value of the Quran is personally? And you're Stephen from Texas. You could be, Joe Schmo from Kazakhstan. Doesn't matter. But like.
And I'm asking again from the perspective of looking at it, going, it's not the best source for anything with respect to science. I don't think it's the best source with respect to anything with respect to morality. So what's left? I don't think it comes from a God.
I mean, well, yeah. So that's your perspective. I don't think it's the best source of science at all either. That's more of like something for Muslims to help them, feel more certain in their religion. But in terms of what it offers us. What I hear is like we have the minimal amount of like alcoholics in the world. We don't have like drunk driving and like, drunken spousal abuse. There's like relatively low like drug abuse. We say that we're like fair to women because in the old days, women were not considered a person and, they couldn't own property. So like we liberated women.
Yeah. I've heard those before, but when I look at how women are treated in sort of Islamic traditions and in certain parts of the world where people will identify as Muslims, I don't look at that as being exemplars of women's equality or where like my friends in the
Arabs get
LGBTQIA plus community are treated very well, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah,
and Stephen, maybe in the year, I don't know, 1500, that may have been the case. But let's look at the year 2022. Are we in 2022? There's data. There's data out there. And the funny thing about, there being low instances of spousal abuse is it has to be reported. And there has to be a definition.
Right.
Of what constitutes it. And I'm not throwing all Muslims under the bus. I know that there's different sects, there's different global regions that are different. But
I qualified that with alcohol related spousal abuse.
Oh, alcohol related spousal abuse as opposed to stone cold sober spousal abuse. Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. I don't know. With all that said, Stephen, I think that's where you find the value. Is that where you find the value in Islam and in the Quran?
Well, I would say personally, my value is like it's a path to not go to hell. Is probably the prime, directive, or like that's what we're taught we have at stake, right? So there's no like worse thing than like avoiding hell forever, right?
Yeah, sure. If it exists.
If it exists, that's a pretty big.
Stephen, I was taught a lot of stuff too when I was younger, and which was every part of my life. I was younger than I am right now, and historically speaking,
back when you were Johnny P. Cherub,
right? And now I'm Johnny P. Metatron. I don't know, but
where do we go from here?
Yeah, where do we go? Where do we go now? But the journey of life. There's a Jean-Luc Picard quote in here somewhere. Is to really explore, to me, to explore my place in the world, what meaning I can derive from existence, to make a positive impact, to understand things, right? And I was taught a lot of stuff, and a lot of it was good stuff, and I've carried it with me. And some of it was really bad stuff. And I don't mean like necessarily religious trauma, because I had a pretty easy life, right? But you learn habits from your parents, and some of those habits aren't the best. And I formed ideas about things, about people, about groups, about the way the world works. And sometimes when I read a new fact, it sticks in my craw, and I have to take it out of my craw and like set it aside and look at it and say, that's not useful anymore. I may have been taught this, but ignoring that I was taught it, does this really work? And then I go to my little laboratory of life, and I figure out, oh, this is a bad thought, or this is inaccurate, or this was a simplistic understanding of a much more complicated situation. Or why do I really think that this is something? And I would encourage you, and it sounds like I'm doing it, Stephen. I'm not telling you that I'm further along on this journey than you are. I'm certainly not. I'm a fellow traveler on the journey of life. And it sounds like you are a thoughtful person who we don't agree on the usefulness of Islam or the Quran. Okay, well, let's keep on asking those questions. Call back when we have hosts that can speak more to Islam, because we can make some headway in understanding each other.
Yeah, and next time, if I'm around next time you call, I would love to dig into questions about really the truth of certain claims. I mean, you bring up something like a hell, and my ears perk up, and I want to go, well, why on earth would we believe that a hell is a thing? That kind of stuff. But we do need to get to some other callers. But Stephen, this has been an example of exactly the kind of engagement with theists that we want to have.
Okay, thanks so much. It was good talking to you all.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care.